Louisiana Tech makes it official, going to the Sun Belt, which of course raises the same question.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first to listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. Bryant Haines, just the gift that keeps on giving, Indiana's defensive coordinator, and Alabama lands the top-rated quarterback in the class of 2027. Some things never change, even though many things have changed. Here's something that hasn't changed as much as you might think. Everyone wants to move into a bigger conference and be at the cool kids table. The question that Louisiana Tech reaching a settlement for $8 million with Conference USA to leave to join the Sun Belt raises the same question. Who's next? What is next? Which conference is now going to look and make a move? Something I've noticed with all these sorts of moves, whether it's at the FBS level, the FCS level, whatever's going on. Anytime someone makes any type of move, whether it's backfilling, as this one is for Louisiana Tech to be in the Sun Belt, or whether it's an aggressive expansion move, or whether it's, taking a team away from somewhere else, whatever context you want to apply, everybody else gets antsy. There's like an understood arrangement among schools that if any school makes a move, everyone else has to look around and go, "Oh, whoa. Are we supposed to be doing something? Should we be doing that? Are we getting left behind because we're not doing what they're doing?" There are a bunch of examples to this. So one thing that pops into my mind here is Tarleton State, because Louisiana Tech now not being officially for 2026 a part of Conference USA this year brings to mind a school that I talked about last week on the show. Tarleton State could potentially be a target for the Mountain West to dip their toe into the state of Texas if they so choose. Louisiana Tech confirming that they have now departed Conference USA officially creates a little bit more of a void. And Conference USA has been an incredibly transient league, not just over the last several years, but for quite a long time. There's a similarity to me between Conference USA and the American. And I would put the WAC in this conversation, except the WAC, RIP, is no more. And so it's reconstituted in a way into the UAC. Schools have come and gone out of these conferences, Conference USA and the American, for quite a while. And they understand it. Remember when the Big 12 had to backfill Texas and Oklahoma leaving for the SEC? Where did they pull teams from? The American. In that moment, was the American's existence, future, strength threatened? Sure. Here it is. Still there. In my view, it is 1A or 1B amongst the group of 6 conferences going into this year. It's a pretty remarkable job by their leadership. It's not as easy as it sounds. Well, Conference USA has kind of been the same way. Louisiana Tech has now gone. UTEP has gone. They're going over to the Mountain West. And they just keep finding options. And they have been more than willing to pull schools up from the FCS ranks. Think about Kennesaw State, Sam Houston. Could Tarleton be next? We may very well soon find out on that particular front. But the other angle of this, I think about when I look at Louisiana Tech making a move. These are not major brands that are moving around, but they're just so desperate in a way. You could look at it through a lens of being aggressive or being desperate. I think there's a little bit of both. But Louisiana Tech, which in Conference USA, you're not making buku bucks with your conference media rights deal. You're not selling out all of your home games the way you do in the SEC. You don't have sponsorship deals that are worth nearly as much because you don't have as many people watching on TV, of course, as you do in other conferences. Certainly there's more money than some people might realize, but $8 million to Louisiana Tech to be in the Sun Belt. Why? Because the Sun Belt grades as and is a better football conference than Conference USA. And I think this ties all the way back, well, not that far back, but this past year to James Madison making the college football playoff. A Conference USA team is not going to get that sort of access. And sure, the Dukes had to go undefeated and get some help to do it. And now there has been a change in the playoff rule structure to ensure the Power Four champions get in, and likely just one group of 6 team is getting in. There is technically a scenario where 2 could get in, but you'd have to have a strong resume of Power Four wins, probably at least 2 pretty darn good ones. You might have to go undefeated. You'd probably have to go undefeated and then lose a conference championship game so you don't have the bid. Although the group of 6 team that gets in the playoff doesn't have to be a conference champion. So, yeah, they really have set up the rules so that one group of 6 team gets in. But do you have better access to that in the Sun Belt than you do in Conference USA? Just by lieu of James Madison having made it the year before and giving the league that pedigree. Yes, 100% you do. Louisiana Tech has not had a 10-win season in football since 2019. They won the Independence Bowl last year against Coastal Carolina. I watched some of it because I watched bits and pieces of basically every single bowl game. I'm one of those weird people that just enjoys bowl season, and I don't think that it has to go away in order for the playoff to be structured correctly. No, bowl season can still be the appetizer for a college football playoff game. They had that this past year. It was spectacularly good. It was fantastic. Before, I think it was Ohio State, Miami was the nightcap. And before that, I think you had Iowa and Vandy and Michigan, Texas. It was awesome. It's a great day of college football. But anyway, the utter desperation, urgency, and willingness to just do whatever it takes to get forward because of the opportunity that we're in. And look, it's 2026. If you've ever heard myself or many other pundits in the space and folks talking on TV about, could there be a big realignment? Could that come around? That is so much closer than you think. Because the conference media rights deals for the Big Ten and SEC, and I believe Big 12 too, expire in the early 2030s. When do conversations have to start? Probably within the next year or 2. When does action have to take place? Realignment moves get announced at least a year in advance, generally more. So we're just not that far away from that potential, we don't know if it's going to happen, massive realignment where you have an AFC, NFC type model, and everybody wants to just have a seat at the table. It's why North Dakota State is paying so much money to be a part of the Mountain West in football. Why Sacramento State, even though they have been good but not top tier at the FCS, said, how can we get in? We'll join the MAC. Okay, whatever it takes. And the Hornets are playing in the MAC this year. And now Louisiana Tech is doing the exact same thing and saying, you know what? If we can get to the Sun Belt sooner rather than later, we said 2027, but we got to start playing Sun Belt games now. We got to restitch our jerseys. We got to have that extra pedigree. We have to start playing league games. We also can't be listed on two conferences league schedules because, well, that just creates a logistical nightmare for all involved. So the urgency for everyone to try and find their way to the big kids table, I don't think it's going anywhere. So I'm just sitting here wondering, again, who's next? You tell me in the comments below, or you hit me up on Twitter at @LockedOn_CFB, however you want to get in touch. Indiana's defensive coordinator is becoming my personal favorite coach in the country. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. Skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data, worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Thank you for making this show your first listen or your first view every day. If you tune into every episode and want to level up, check out the Locked On Everydayer Club. For $5 a month or $50 for the year, you get access to ad-free audio on podcasts, access into our members-only Discord chat as well, and other perks too. Click the link in the description below and become a Locked On Everydayer Club member today. So as someone who is in the college football commentary and content creation space, here at the end of April, yes, spring ball is a grand and glorious time to get an understanding of where everybody is at, which players are rising, which teams feel like they're on the downward slide, who's got big expectations, where should those be, are FanDuel's win totals way off or are they perfect, all of that sort of stuff. But then every now and then, it's nice when someone, out of the goodness of his heart in college football, decides, you know what, here is the easiest topic selection you will ever find. So Bryant Haines, the Indiana defensive coordinator, for no particular reason, just decided in a since deleted post, but we all know what it said, just decided to tweet out, just for funsies, I guess, quote, best offenses we saw in 2025, scheme-based. 1, Miami. Shout out Shannon Dawson. 2, Oregon won. That'd be the first time they played Oregon. 3, Ohio State. 4, Penn State. Then he adds the qualifier, unorthodox but challenging. It's just a blizzard. It's just vanilla ice cream and your favorite ingredients. That's all it is. That's all it is, right, Penn State? Okay. 5, Paul Finebaum just being weird. 6, Oregon 2. So then he goes on to make a comment about something I feel very passionately about, not just as an Oregon guy, but as a college football fan. And he said the reason Oregon 2 was lower is, quote, Oregon 2 had an OC that was torn away by a new job. Coach Stein is elite, but he was not at full game plan, and their running back room was decimated, end quote. Now, he's getting at something very real in college football, which is the calendar is so fundamentally broken that coaches were indeed being asked to do two jobs at the same time. And the irony of him pointing that out, because I have noted this several times here on the show before, and I will speak it into existence, not because I don't like my guy Jacob Goins over at Locked On Hoosiers, but because he's just too smart to stay put as highly paid as he is. Bryant Haines is likely to find himself in that very position going into 2027. Because I can assure you, he has been contacted before. I'm sure he has taken an interest in becoming a head coach. He has learned from the best head coach in college football in Curt Cignetti, and his defense is unbelievably awesome. Most defenses are fun to watch. Like Kirby Smart's defenses at Georgia, when they won back-to-back national championships, they were fun to watch because of the players they had. Indiana's defense was fun to watch because of the players they were doing it with. There was not a single solitary first-round NFL draft pick on Indiana's defense this past year. Not one. And yet they won the national championship. Sure, they're the number one pick playing quarterback. Yeah, they made him into the number one pick. By the way, just to be clear, that's what you'd call elite coaching and development. But Bryant Haines on the other side of the ball made defense a joy to watch with a bunch of guys that the NFL said, maybe second or third round. They got drafted, but they weren't early round picks. So anyway, this comes, of course, on the heels, for those that missed it last week, on Bryant Haines taking some shots at Alabama fans. Now, I wonder if he isn't doing a little self-promotion. Like, there's a Lane Kiffin parallel to what he's doing. Because Lane Kiffin, by any objective metric, if you are a media-savvy individual, and I know many of you are, is a great follow on Twitter. And every now and then, he will send stuff out there that makes you go, Lane, really? That's what you're thinking about? You're taking shots at so-and-so over there? I don't think Bryant Haines was taking a shot at anybody here except for Paul Finebaum. And look, how many of us have not taken a shot at Paul Finebaum? My hand is down. My hand is very down. I can't even think about going. I can't even put it up as a joke. My everydayers know that. And I think everybody in the college football space is kind of a rite of passage or something you do. You got to find a Paul Finebaum take that you don't like and push back on it. Whether you are someone that has a show and is in the commentary space or is just a fan making your voice heard as best you can online. So there's a Lane Kiffin element, it feels, to what he's doing. Now, he's the defensive coordinator, not the head coach, so I imagine Curt Cignetti was the one that said, hey, let's not be doing that. But I tell you what this also kind of feels like. And I don't know that this is intentional in what he's going for, because the self-promotion, the showing personality, putting yourself out there, getting your name's in the news, right? You do stuff like this, boom. People are going to talk about it. Why? It's entertaining. It's fun. And it's football related because he's a football guy. But I wonder if in anyone's minds this is making him into a little bit more of a villain. Like, Indiana is really easy to like, at least in my view. I mean, they were literally, until 2 years ago, the worst program in the history of college football. I am not being hyperbolic. I am being factual. If an AI chatbot were hosting this show, it would give you the exact same take, because that's just the way that it was. But that's no longer the way that it is. But as we've seen in sports, I don't even know how many times over the years, if you stay on top for too long, well, suddenly they don't like you as much. Does this fuel that particular fire? I have absolutely no idea. I'm excited to stick around and find out. Maybe this is just one of those offseason stories that just dissolves into the ether, fades off into the distance, goes on the back burner, and then all of a sudden it's fallen down in that crack behind the stove and in between the wall. And there's a little bit of room and it falls there, and, well, you're not going to see that again until you get a new stove, but that's not going to be for a very long time. It's entirely possible that that's what one of the outcomes here is going to be. But I tell you, I see this more as Bryant Haines was being incredibly honest. He takes a shot at a very well-known pundit, and for some reason, Curt Cignetti or someone at Indiana said, no, don't do that. Or maybe he decided that's not a good idea. Not entirely sure. Haven't spoken to him on that particular matter. But I tell you what, if you were on that list as a fan or as a coach listening to or watching this show, you got to feel pretty good, because that guy's the best at his job in the entire country, and made a point of saying, yeah, Shannon Dawson, your offense was tough. Will Stein, now the head coach of Kentucky, yeah, your offense was tough. Penn State, Andy Kotelnicki, oof, man, that was brutal to try and go against last year. And then Will Stein again. Maybe this is just Kentucky fans. You should feel great because, Will Stein is off to a really, really good start. Speaking of that good start, by the way, did you see what happened in the SEC? It was not surprising, but the backdrop makes it all the more fascinating that Elijah Haven is going to Alabama. Elijah Haven is, by several services and outlets, the number one quarterback in the class of 2027, and he's going to Alabama. I'll talk about what he brings to the table in just a moment. I want to start with the big picture look at the recruiting landscape in the SEC. Alabama got Haven's commitment over Georgia. The last time Georgia was in a Final Two for a five-star quarterback was 2026 incoming true freshman Jared Curtis. And they won that recruiting battle over Oregon. And then, all of a sudden, here came Vanderbilt. And Jared Curtis may very well start at Vanderbilt this year. And I think that would be super exciting. A lot of people are going to look at Vanderbilt, and the odds makers over at FanDuel believe this too, and they see a pullback team, a group that is not going to achieve the same level of success they had the year before, and there could very well be some merit to that since Diego Pavia, who went undrafted, is no longer there to be basically their entire offense. Maybe Jared Curtis is my Bryce Underwood of 2026. Start him, endure the growing pains, and get ready for 2027. So, Haven going to Alabama over Georgia, and the ability of the Bulldogs to lose out on these two blue chip prospects. And they got Bryson Beaver, who was a one-time Oregon commit, who is an incredibly solid prospect, I think can do well. He's not the same caliber of quarterback as Elijah Haven or Jared Curtis, hence the gap in the recruiting rankings. Beaver's been more of a late riser. He's a 3-star. He's once committed to Boise State. Now he is at the University of Georgia. Go figure. College football in 2026. So Georgia losing those battles to Alabama is one thing, but to Vanderbilt is another. And then I'm not making this an indictment of Mike Bobo, the Georgia offensive coordinator. For Kentucky to have Jake Narok committed as their 2027 quarterback recruit, it is once again just a crazy evolution of how the talent has been dispersed thanks to NIL and the portal more than it was before. A lot of negativity out there about NIL and the portal. One thing that was flying around online over the weekend was how the talent drain has made it really hard for the group of six to keep up with the Power Four, and that was being reflected in the NFL draft numbers. And those numbers are stark. There are a lot of guys going to the league from the Power Four, and there are not very many from the group of six. And yes, that absolutely makes it tougher to compete. There's another side of that, but if you want to make the argument it's a net negative, the NFL draft number certainly would indicate that. But again, at the top, Alabama getting a big-time quarterback recruit. Not surprising, especially with a guy like Kalen DeBoer, whose track record is pretty darn good when it comes to quarterbacks. Jake Haener has been a backup for several years, even though he's undersized. He coached him at Fresno State. Michael Penix, top 10 pick. And then Jalen Milroe, who he coached for a year, did not coach him the year before, of course, but coached him for a year. He was a third-round pick of my Seattle Seahawks. Go Hawks, Super Bowl champs. So it's just fascinating to watch these dynamics continue to play out, and somehow Georgia, of all teams over the last couple cycles, is the one looking around going, what's going on here? We're the two-time reigning SEC champions. A lot goes into this sort of stuff. And Elijah Haven, boy, special quarterback prospect. 6'5", 215 pounds. By the way, I don't know if the Lane Kiffin timing and turnover and them bringing over Hassan Longstreet from USC is probably a big part of why they weren't in the fold here. But he's from Baton Rouge, Dunham School down there, just won a state championship. Elijah Haven, who can also play basketball, by the way, was all-league, all-state performer in that regard. He averaged 13 points, 9.5 rebounds a game as a freshman. This past year, he set state records with touchdown passes, 62. Total touchdowns, 73. He ran for 11 of them. He threw for over 3,900 yards, completing over 72% of his throws. And he ran for 794 yards on the ground on 127 carries. That's 6.3 yards per run. This guy has the tools to not just be the face of Alabama football, to be a guy that wins an SEC or a national championship for Kalen DeBoer, who, by the way, pretty nice pickup to have after it's announced you get a major extension, which I was down on last week. And I think that was more tied to the fact that Michigan had serious interest in poaching him away from Tuscaloosa. But if you're an Alabama fan, this has to make you feel good. Go, okay, well, hasn't always been known as a recruiter, but he's got Elijah Haven, who's got what looks like a fluid and more explosive Phillip Rivers throwing motion, kind of 3/4, drop down release, but the ball comes out of his hand so easily. His ball placement is exceptional. He moves unbelievably well, and he is really built. You think of a lot of tall quarterbacks at 6'5", and you went, they're a little thin, a little wiry. Nope. He's every bit of 215 pounds. He's incredibly well built. He's like if you took Jalen Milroe, made him a little taller, basically the same running ability, and gave him a much better throwing motion. That's who Alabama just landed. The number one quarterback in the class of 2027. So, good news if you're an Alabama fan. Not as good a news if you're anyone that's going to have to try and guard him one day. Or scheme around him. Make a game plan. Good luck. Hat tip to defensive coordinators in the SEC. You have got quite the task ahead of you. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.